Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private.
Hello there. Welcome to the Recovery Cast, brought to you by Hills and Rangers Private. My name's Oliver and I'm a former addict in recovery. The Recovery Cast is a podcast created by people in recovery from addiction for people in recovery from addiction. There are many definitions of addiction, but we keep it simple. Addiction to us is when people use alcohol, drugs or certain behaviours repetitively to their detriment, basically when it's a problem for them and their families. Therefore, an addict is not necessarily someone using a needle in a dark laneway, and an alcoholic is not necessarily a homeless man in a park. Recovery for us means using an active daily process or program to deal with alcohol use disorder, substance use disorder, or other behavioural addictions. People in recovery are committed to complete abstinence. This daily process is as important to being able to live normal lives as daily dialysis is for people with kidney problems. This podcast is meant as a support tool for those in recovery. I myself am a recovering drug addict, however, each day we will focus on a different perspective of recovery. Everyone who participates in the podcast is in an active recovery program. We are not affiliated with any one recovery methodology, however, and will focus on different aspects of recovery, such as 12-step programs like AA and NA, Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, Recovery Dharma, Cognitive Behavioural Therapy, and more. And a quick disclaimer, this podcast is intended to be informative. A podcast alone cannot support your sobriety and your recovery, so we suggest it as only one component of a daily recovery routine. For more information on what recovery is, please go to www.rehab.melbourne. We have another special episode for you, and so far we've talked about, a great deal of topics. We've had lots of guests on the show, but today I'd like to talk to you about another one of the 12 steps. So we've done all the way up through to step 6, and now we're at step 7. And I'm just going to share a little bit of information on it and what my experience was with it, just as a sort of maybe breaking down some of those questions that you may have, or a lack of sort of understanding. I know for me, when I came into recovery, I thought, well, what is this 12-step stuff? I'd seen it all in movies, and it was all very sad-looking people in a church basement in a little circle in the dark, sort of murmuring to each other, and I didn't understand what was really going on. And my understanding today is very different to that. So we'll have a bit of a chat about that, talk about step 7. But first we're going to do the daily reading. So today's date is November 9, and we're doing the reading from the Alcoholics Anonymous Daily Reflections book. And today's reading is entitled Stepping into the Sunlight. But first of all, we shall want sunlight. Nothing much can grow in the dark. Meditation is our step out into the sun, as Bill sees it, page 10. Sometimes I think I don't have time for prayer and meditation, forgetting that I always found time to drink. It is possible to make time for anything I want to do if I want it badly enough. When I start the routine of prayer and meditation, it's a good idea to plan to devote a small amount of time to it. I read a page from our fellowship's books in the morning and say, "Thank you, God," when I go to bed at night. As prayer becomes a habit, I will increase the time spent on it without even noticing the foray it makes into my busy day. If I have trouble praying, I just repeat the Lord's Prayer because it really covers everything. Then I think of what I can be grateful for and say a word of thanks. I don't need to shut myself in a closet to pray. It can be done even in a room full of people. I just remove myself mentally for an instant. As the practice of prayer continues, I will find I don't need words, for God can and does hear my thoughts through silence. It's another God one. Yeah, so that's really interesting. Just talks about very much the sort of prayer and meditation thing again, which we've covered. We've actually covered prayer and we've covered meditation in separate episodes. So we won't spend too much time on this reading, but I just want to sort of unpack it a little bit and talk about what I got from it. Definitely meditation is our step out into the sun. That's something that I can agree with and something that I can identify with, that I didn't actually have a great understanding of who I was and myself and how I was feeling when I came into recovery and when I was using. I was definitely quite confused, and that self-inquiry and sort of clarity that comes from meditation and that results from meditation it just helped me work things out and helped me sort of get a bit of clarity in my life of who I was and what I wanted to do and the way things actually were. I can definitely say that when I was using, my life was a bit of a disaster and a little bit of a sort of a dramatic, almost a fantasy land, because I was just so out of touch with reality. And when I was meditating in early recovery, it sort of cleaned wiped the slate clean, so to speak, in that regard. And it was definitely just a step out into the sun in that, like, exactly like that. It just sort of shone the light of like reality on my situation and helped me understand what was really going on. And in terms of the prayer thing, look, yeah, we've talked about it a lot, but I think it's great because it says, you don't have to lock yourself in a closet to pray. And we'll actually do some reading on prayer from the Narcotics Anonymous Step Working Guides as well, to get some context from another fellowship about how prayer works and what prayer actually is. So I'm just looking in there now. I'm looking in the green and gold book that you answer all the questions from when you're doing the steps. And we're seeing here, where did I see it? Very much, it's based on spiritual principles, and prayer is part of that. For me, it teaches me that it strengthens my understanding of the various steps that involve, a higher power. So step 3, step 2, step 11, and step 6 and 7. So it's not super important what they are. We're going to talk about step 7 today. So basically step 7, if for the uninitiated, is we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So what that's all about is basically, if you've joined us recently and missed the first 6 episodes about, or the first episodes about the particular steps before that, it gets us to the point where we admit that we're powerless over our addiction and that it had made our lives really unmanageable. That's the first step. The second step is that we believe, or we come to believe, to start thinking about the fact that there might be a power greater than ourselves that can help us restore us to sanity. So that's finding, a higher power. They say God. It's a God of your understanding. So it's not the God. It's just something that's greater than you. It can be whatever you want. And then step 3 is the decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of that God as you understand them. So it's sort of like putting faith in that God, that you'll be guided through your life and taken care of, and that you don't have to worry too much about what's going on because it's beyond your control. Then step 4 is that you check out and think about all the stuff you've done in your life, make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Then we share it with our sponsor, ourselves, and with God. And then once you work out, I think for me, I worked out all the stuff that all my character defects, all the things that I'd done. And then step 6 is that we were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. I talked about that. My biggest character defect was control. So that brings us to step 7, where we humbly ask the God of our understanding to remove our shortcomings. So I'll talk about it from my perspective about how that all worked. It's pretty interesting for me. Like I've experienced a lot of different types of recovery programs recently and in the last 4 and a bit years of my recovery, including day programs and counselling, things like that, various group therapies and lots of meetings as well. And I find that, it's just basically a matter of, it involves a lot of prayer for me. I had to sit down and say, well, look, I've got all these issues with myself, so I'm a control freak. That was my major defect. And at the beginning of the day, I would wake up in the morning and I would just close my eyes. I've said here before that I do most of my prayer in the shower, just in the morning. It's a very quiet place. It's relaxing, like a nice hot shower. And I sort of sit down on the floor in the shower, and that's where I do my prayer for the morning. And working step 7 for me was about saying, I have this character defect. It's a shortcoming, and that I would like it to be removed, and that I'm ready to have it removed. And it wasn't even just the act of asking. So I don't just ask. It's not like I just ask and then it's magically removed. It didn't work that way for me. I don't think it can work that way in my experience. I had to have that consciously in my head, that my intention was to have that defect of character removed, that my shortcoming needed to be removed, and I was ready, and I'd ask for it to be removed. And whenever I'd notice it come up during the day, I'd have a little bit more awareness around it. So an example of how my control comes up during the day, perhaps it might be something at home with my partner, or something, like a communication thing, or I feel like she didn't do enough jobs to contribute to the household. It would rub me up the wrong way. So I would say, well, I've done this, and this for the house. I've swept the floors. I've vacuumed. I've changed the sheets on the bed this week and been shopping. And what's she done? That's a control thing of like how I need to be in control and I need to call the shots. And why isn't she doing this? That's a very basic and very common issue that I have, is control for just daily life stuff. And when I see that coming up, and I think about that, and I think, oh, why hasn't my partner contributed to the house? Then I just stop and I pull myself up and I think, hang on a minute, that's control. So I'm trying to control the situation. Now, I need to realize that I'm powerless over what other people do. And I can, of course, go and say, hey, honey, can you please, do the dishes tonight, or say, hey, I did the shopping this week. Can you go and do the shopping next week? And just be open and communicate about it. But I wouldn't allow it to get to the point where I'm resenting my partner for not doing something that I wanted her to do. That's where that character defect brings me into trouble in my life and starts creating turbulence, and it stems into and flows on into every aspect of my life, and the way I'm feeling about, and the way I interact with other people later on throughout the day, and makes everything worse. That's how my active addiction sort of manifested, because I didn't know how to deal with basic stuff of how I was feeling. So when I notice something like that coming up, I'll just think, okay, righto, it's control, and I'll look at the fact that, well, it's not a big deal, and I actually am grateful to have a partner today, and all these things are just normal aspects of a relationship, and we can share the household roles and jobs and things that need to be done. And then I would think, well, it's actually not my partner's fault, and it's actually my defect that's coming into play here. And then I'll look at it that way, and then it'll be like, well, okay, why don't I go and ask my partner to come shopping with me, and we can go and get the groceries and stuff together. And that just completely avoids that resentment that builds up inside me and that lack of control feeling that I struggle with. That's how it manifests for me. That's how it starts. And I mean, it's obviously a lot deeper than that, the 7th step, but we'll talk a little bit more about it after the break.
You're listening to the Recovery Cast by Hills and Rangers Private. Now playing daily on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. For more shows, visit us at www.humbly.com. humbly.rehab.melbourne.
So yeah, we're talking about step 7, and I'm going to read from the Green and Gold, which is what I was looking at before, which is the Narcotics Anonymous step working guide. So it's an instructional thing. It tells you, and you learn and answer questions when you're doing the steps. So this is from the step 7 section, preparing to work step 7. We've already done much of the spiritual preparation we'll need to begin step 7. It's important that we draw the connection between the work we've done and the results that work has produced. The previous steps have all served to sow the seeds of humility in our spirits. In this step, those seeds take root and grow. And from another section, many of us came to NA with a certain street mentality. The only way we knew how to get what we wanted was by approaching it indirectly and manipulating people. We didn't realise that we could just be forthright and have the same chance, if not better, of fulfilling our needs. We spent years learning to blank our facial expressions, hide our compassion, and harden ourselves. By the time we arrived at NA, we were very good at it, so good in fact that novice addicts were probably looking at our example the same way we looked to older addicts when we first started using. We learned to suppress all humanity and became in many cases completely inhuman. So this is, I think, what they're talking about is that we learn to move past that and start actually doing that work that we need to do about having our shortcomings removed. Humility. I want to talk about humility. Humility is a sense of our own humanness. If this is our first experience with the 7th step, this may be the point when we first feel a sense of compassion for ourselves. It's deeply moving to realise for the first time that we're just truly human and trying our best. We make decisions, both good and bad, and hope things turn out okay. With this knowledge about who we are, we also realise that just as we're doing our best, so are other people. We feel a real connection with others, knowing that we're all subject to the same insecurities and failings, and that we all have dreams for the future. Now we need to acknowledge our own humility and explore how it makes itself known in our everyday lives. So I can refer that back to what I was talking about, how my shortcoming of control is affecting my daily life with my partner. That if I actually come to that situation with a sense of humility and realize that, yes, I'm just trying my best and my partner's trying her best as well, I realize that actually there's no need to get resentful about not contributing to the household. We're both just trying our best. She works really hard as a nurse, and I work really hard as a music teacher and consulting specialist and podcast maker. Strange combination, but yeah, here we are. And that, look, we're doing our best, and I just feel a real connection with her, and that I realize that, like, we're all subject to the same insecurities and failings, that we all have dreams. So realize that, yeah, I feel like I need to have my efforts at home met, and I have my expectations and I'd like to have them met, that we both contribute to the household. But really, when I come at it from a sense of humility, I realize that, like, it's okay, and we can look after each other and do all that stuff together. Wow, that's 19 minutes of me talking. I feel like I could go and talk about this for a lot longer. But basically, I think I should sum up by saying, look, yeah, it's a long process doing these steps. And for me, when I finished the 7th step and started working on the 8th step, I thought that, I would have all these shortcomings removed, and it would magically, I wouldn't be so controlling anymore. And unfortunately, the universe had some news for me, and it was that, well, it doesn't work that way, and I actually have to keep working at having my shortcomings removed, and I have to keep praying for those shortcomings to be removed and working on it. And every day when something like that comes up, I just become more aware of it. And that's how we begin to heal from those painful and quite harmful habits that we made during our active addiction. I had my control stuff removed, but at least I'm aware of it now, and I can work towards not being so controlling of the situation. That's where it all comes from. It's a growth and a progress program. It's not a perfection program. And I think it's very much, what anybody can take away. My listeners, you guys may not be involved in NA, and you don't even need to be necessarily in order to recover. However, just realize that it's progress, and it's not about being perfect. We're all human. Even people who don't have addiction problems do, they have their own difficulties. It's just things can be really difficult. But the main thing of what is important is that in recovery, when we're not creating our own problems through that addiction and active addiction and addictive behaviors and things like that, we're actually growing and learning to live productive lives as, contributing members of society. And slowly those old habits do fall away as long as we make the effort to stay in recovery and keep sort of searching and trying to be better people. And that's really what it's about for me. So I hope you sort of got something out of that. If you've got any questions, get in touch with the team at Hills and Ranges Private. Visit www.rehab.melbourne. Ask them about it. Everybody on staff at Hills and Ranges Private has personal lived experience with addiction, and it just enables them to provide better care and treatment because they've walked that path themselves. So yeah, we'll talk about the next few steps in subsequent episodes, but until then, have an awesome day. I'll speak to you soon. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Recovery Cast. For more, visit us at www.rehab.melbourne.